All right, we have Kramer's class.
Kramer's class had a total of 20 students, 7 of which were males, and the other 13 were females. There was a total of 4 Hispanics, 5 African American students, 9 Caucasian students, and 2 Asian identified students, 3 of which had limited English proficiency, which equated to 15% of the class. 2 of the LEP students were female and 1 was male. There were 3 students with disabilities, which was once again equated to 15% of the class.
I think gender had a lot to do with a lot of our documentation. We based and did a lot of analyzing with that. And when looking at the male versus female, we found that there was pretty much no difference in their learning style or their capability of doing the work.
Yep. So we had the average scale score for the class was for males was 355.3, and the average scale score for our class for the females was 357.8. So they were very similar in both.
I also thought like the ethnicity, it did play a big part of it. There was, a lot less white in the Kramer's class than was, say, Malone's or Johnson's as well. I think that had a big effect on how the data played out, just because of the different ethnic groups.
So I'm seeing that it's a ratio of 2 to 1 for both students with disabilities and students with limited English proficiency, with 2 being female, 1 being male. Was there any data showing the ethnicities of the disabilities
of those 2
LEPs?
I think it was, let's see, I'm not sure if there was any.
I don't think we had anything.
I don't think we didn't look at the disabilities, Madison.
Okay.
But overall, like I said, with that ethnic code, there definitely was less white in the group than was the different minority of the other groups. And we found that the females for African American group, I believe it was pretty low.
Yeah, there
were 0 males in the
0 male African Americans.
Yeah.
Kind of following that trend, 25% of the class was African American. Just as stated before, 5 of which were African American females and 0 African American males.
You can go, John.
Well, I was gonna say when we compared the other 2 classes to our teacher and the data, it was pretty similar across what the ethnicities were and the scores, the scale scores for them was pretty much the same.
Yep. So we probably should start by giving help to the outside learners. The people that are struggling a little bit more because their scores were not so high. Probably hands-on learning would be the most beneficial for the whole group instruction. Less reading and more use of hands. So
I agree. I agree with that, Andrew. Definitely, like I said, we can reach your learners that have the English or they're proficient in their language is less. Where you have activities where there is less language being used, they are going to be more successful.
Mm-hmm. Yep. As compared to the other classes, I'm sorry, I'm not looking at that one. I'm looking at the shared document. Were our scale scores pretty equivalent to the other classes? We're looking at just comparing males and females, but
they were all kind of in that 300 range, higher 300s. Nobody went below that. And in both classes, they're all in that upper 300s.
I'd say we're
for the
average.
grade level in that school.
Yep. Yep.
Awesome. So yeah, I think using hands-on stuff and less language for directional stuff, unless there's visual prompts too, might be helpful.
mean-
for their language.
You mean like a card type thing to with the directions on it? Were you
Yeah,
thinking?
or
Yeah.
drawing pictures of the directions as you would for younger ages that don't know how to read.
Yes, that's what I was thinking as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. And also you could pair them up with a student that was more proficient in their English or whatnot language.
Yeah,
Yep.
that'd be a good idea.
We were also discussing that we should break the data into sectional data. And we could bring our findings to our data meetings. Each teacher would bring their own results to the meeting and would compare their findings with other classrooms.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
When you say break it up sectionally, are you talking like subject wise or time wise?
Like for the data meetings, you know how the data meetings were broken down into different certain things.
Yep. Gotcha.
I think that's, would be the most beneficial because when you do meet together as a PLC group, there's so much data to go over that what do you tackle first?
Mhm.
And I thought that book, the data that we read for a class, broke it down very nice into the different meetings. Was able to have it more manageable
Using the
data meetings.
upside down triangle for lack of knowing what it's called.
Yeah. Yeah.
We know what you mean.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What would we recommend that we would bring to our first meeting?
All the data.
I would probably bring your data and then some goals that you've thought of that you could narrow down with the rest of your PLC team.
Yeah, I think making it very, for sure, like just very directive. Which goals you're gonna focus on, not having it too large because then you get lost and on what your goals are and how you're gonna accomplish those goals.
How would you, with there being so many English language learners, track their learning? Because I feel like sometimes with testing, you're not necessarily seeing,
Their proficiency. I guess for, language learner, you can always have, like I said, doing that hands-on learning, not necessarily saying that you're going to give them a reading piece or to do the assignment. Give them the manipulatives. You can do it. You can do a formative assessment just right on the spot. You don't need to have the summative assessments to see whether they're flourishing or not.
I think using other resources too. There's, Google and everything. Teachers pay teachers have a lot of stuff that would be very beneficial for all students.
Do you think a lot of like project-based assessments, because you do need some summative assessments to be able to track all of their data? And like you said, with there being a lot of LEPs, sometimes just giving them stuff to read might not be as beneficial to see where they're at in other areas.
Yeah, I agree.
So maybe stuff.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think there's other ways than just paper pencil to assess where their learning is at. You can clearly just see that when walking by if a student gets it or not. And also, like I said, if they're really, really low, doing that paired shared learning with their peers.
One thing I noticed was exit tickets are always really good to see if they're understanding of it. I did that for my lesson I just did for my health lesson, and yeah, I could easily tell which students got it and which ones didn't just by those exit tickets. It's not a quiz or anything. Just seeing if they know what it was.
I
I think that is a good idea.
exit tickets are a good way of kind of breaking students up into groups too. You can narrow down what you need to assess the following day or even the same day. You know, if you have an opportunity later in the day, I think that'd be very, very beneficial to kind of review rather than waiting until the next day to review.
Yeah, I do agree that, like I said, getting your documentation done as soon as possible, because you forget. You forget. I mean, I know I remember doing in my 6 weeks, some things I thought I remember would for the next day, and it would seem like I would forget the minor little details.
Yeah, I think banking off that, you could also use the KWL charts to even before you start specific lessons and units to see where they're at and then see what they're wanting to learn from it. And then that's a good way to assess them afterwards with the L portion of the chart. Could even
I
be
agree.
the certificate.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. Well, does anybody else have anything to share? I think we pretty much covered the topics, and like I said, this data analysis project, it did bring out some things in my thinking that I had never thought about. Like, just looking at this data was very overwhelming. And where do you start, and how do you glean the information from it? And which area do you pick? There is so much of it. Where do you start and where do you stop? And what do you look at, male, female? Do you look at English learners? Do you look at disabilities? Where do you look at? Because there's so much information on these documents. It just was kind of overwhelming for me at first.
I think I was pretty overwhelmed with all of the data up until I started comparing it to other teachers' classrooms. And I think that's really important to remember as we begin building PLC teams and using each other and bouncing ideas back and forth and kind of comparing the data.
All right.
Yeah.
Kramer
Sounds
out.
good. Good job, guys. Thanks for working with me.
Yep. It's a pleasure.